Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on the video. If you're watching this, it's probably because you have an interest in the R32 GT-R. Now I'm sure you're looking at my frame, looking at the interior of my cabin, thinking that doesn't look like an R32 GT-R. And you're right, this is a Mark IV Supra, but before this I actually had an R32 GT-R. I was probably one of the first group or so that picked one up. I did it back in about 2015. It was a 1990. I got it from a company that I'm not sure is in business anymore called Phase 9. So I just thought I would talk about the car a little bit, tell you what my experience was in owning it. What's it like having a left hand or a right hand drive JDM in the American streets. Some of the things that I kind of noticed about the car, what it's like to own, and daily drive, because my philosophy is if I'm going to have a car like this, I'm going to daily drive it. There's no use for it to just sit in a garage all day. So first of all, I picked up my GT-R. It was pretty much close to stock. The only thing that had done to it when I picked it up was the windows were tinted and it had a set of Tay-in springs on it that were just stiff as hell. Other than that, the car was stock. So I had to do a few things with it once I got it, just kind of make it a little bit more drivable. One of the things being is the stereo. The stereos in Japan run on different frequencies than here, so I had to get a stereo that would work on US frequencies. I kind of went old school with it. I got the one, it's technically a double DIN, but it fits in a single DIN space, because the area on the R32, you have your AC controls, you have your stereo, and then you have like these 3 gauges. A lot of people that put in a double DIN, they get rid of the 3 gauges. I thought it was a cool little perk of having the car, so I wanted to keep it. So I got this stereo that fit into a single DIN. You pushed a button and the double DIN screen kind of slid out and popped up. So that was a fun thing about that. The car was black. Over time, I did put in a Haltech Platinum Pro plug-in. I did some 1000cc injectors. I did a Tomei fuel pump, and I was still on the stock turbos. But the real cool thing about the GT-R is they kind of did a little sneak with it. So as I'm sure you all know, back when the GT-R was being made, there was the gentleman's agreement where all the car manufacturers in Japan got together and agreed not to produce a car that made more than 280 horsepower to the wheels. So the Skyline did that. But if you go into the boost controller, there's this little plastic piece. They call it a pill. It kind of looks like a sleeve. That's kind of this restrictor. Literally, you kind of thread a little bolt into there, you pull it out, and it ups the boost and ups your horsepower just instantaneously. So if you're picking up an R32 GT-R, if you want instant power out of it, just pull that little pill out of the boost controller and boom, you have instant power. I also put a carbon fiber hood on it that was vented, just personal taste. And in the front, it kind of came with what looked like window blinds in my opinion, and I removed those and I got a fiberglass piece that let me put a GT-R logo in the front grille, so it looks like, you know, kind of a little bit more in the lines of the 33, the 34, and the 35. So I did daily drive it, and it didn't give me too many hassles when it came to daily driving. It was a pretty reliable car. Now, having the GT-R, I got quite a few questions, and the ones that I can remember the most common, I figured I'd go ahead and answer for you guys. One of the first questions being was how? How do you have a GT-R? Now, when I had it, we were still just kind of getting rolling on the GT-R. We just kind of learned really about the 25-year exemption rule, so a lot of people didn't know about it. I'm sure people do now, but I'm going to tell you what you need to know to register one here. So to register an R32 GT-R from out of country, you're going to need the car, of course, and you're going to need the importation slip. And the importation slip is usually written in Japanese, assuming that you're getting the car from Japan and not like Australia or Canada or something like that. You then have to take the importation slip and take it to an official translator where they will give you an official translation confirmation of the importation slip, and it's usually got like some sort of a number, their translation number on it, or signature or something to that effect. You then take that stuff to the DMV, you're like, here you go, they look it over, they think you're weird, and then, you know, they ask about 3 or 4 people, and then they figure out, hey, okay, this is okay, and they'll either give you your tags or give you your temporary tags. Now that is true for all the states, but the state I'm in, California. California is just absolutely draconian when it comes to anybody wanting to do anything automotive related. So any other state, a car once it's 25 years old becomes smog exempt. Some states will still require a safety inspection, but most don't. Here in California, we have the California Air Resource Board. Anybody who owns a car hates these guys. So to register the car here in California, the car must still pass California emissions. The only cars that are exempt from California emission standards are made before, I can't remember if it's 1976 or 1974. So any other state, if your car is 25 years old, it should be smog exempt. Here in California, it doesn't matter how old it is based on the years. They froze that date at 1974 or 1976. Like I said, I can't remember which one it is off the top of my head. So you have to take the car into a state ref, and they inspect the car, and they're like, okay, you need to change this, 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 and this to bring it up to compliance. Then you have to go find the parts, install the parts, usually requires some modification, then take it back and they test again. And if you pass, cool. If you don't, you have to take it back, keep working at it. They do charge you every time you take the car in to be tested. On average, getting a JDM car registered in California will cost you anywhere from 10 grand to 15 grand. So if you live here, make sure you factor that into your budget. There is a really cool company, I believe they're in San Diego. I think they go by importavehicle.com. They have another name too, I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's run by Sean Morris, who is, sorry, I'm getting checked out in the Supra. Sean Morris was one of the main guys involved in MotorX. And I'm sure those of you who know about MotorX also know about the horror story that kind of happened to MotorX. Apparently Sean was not involved in all that stuff that went down. It was another guy named Hiro. Whether you believe me or him or not is not consequential, but if you go through his company, he will actually, if you buy one of his cars, you can actually have him get it through the car process for you. So it kind of you don't have to go through all that. He has the recipe, he knows how to get it done. It's still going to run you about 10 grand though, on top of the asking price. So what's it like driving a right-hand drive and a left-hand drive street setup? I gotta tell you, at first, it's kind of fun. It's really unique. You get all sorts of looks. My wife used to have fun. We got her a toy steering wheel where she'd sit on the left-hand side, pretend that she was driving, and then she'd wave with the wheel to people. Freaked them out. You'd see them look in the car, and they'd expect to see someone on the left-hand side. I'm driving on the right-hand side. They're looking for the driver. They can't figure it out. I always found that extremely amusing. Parallel parking is a breeze. You just look out over the door. You can see the curb, makes parallel parking so much easier. There was one thing though I really did not like about driving a right-hand drive car, and that was making left turns at stoplights. So if I'm making a left-hand turn and no one else is making a left-hand turn, it's really, really easy, obviously. However, if I'm making a left-hand turn and there's someone in front of me also making a left-hand turn, say a truck, I can't see past them. So if you see, like, I'm on the left-hand side, if someone's making a left-hand turn, I kind of put my head over a little bit, I can see past them pretty far. If I'm on the right-hand side, their car is blocking my field of vision. I can't see past them to see if it's safe to go. Every time I had to make that left-hand turn, either people would be honking at me or I guess it's safe to go, and I never really knew for sure. I didn't know if I was going to get T-boned, and it was not a fun experience. Some people do ask about doing drive-thrus. I'm not really a big one for fast food. My wife is. So if we did do fast food, I never did the drive-thru. I always ate outside the car. I never ate in the car, so that really wasn't an issue. One of the things that was fun though was getting into parking garages. So it's really funny to pull up to a gate, and to get the parking ticket I would have to get out of my car, walk around the back of the car, get the ticket, and then walk back around and get back in my car and drive past the gate. And the looks on people's faces were just priceless as you get out there trying to figure out why the heck is he getting out of his car to get the ticket. And you walk back in and you see it kind of start to dawn, like the steering wheel's on the other side. So I was kind of amused by that. Now, talking about that's going to lead into some of the comments I used to get. That was kind of amusing and sometimes annoying at the same time. So I'd pull into a parking lot and somebody would inevitably walk up like, hey, your steering wheel's on the wrong side. I'd be like, yeah, it's because I'm dyslexic. They'd be like, oh. And it wasn't until I started laughing if they realized that I was messing with them, and they'd get all angry. The other comment I would get would be like, your steering wheel's on the wrong side. Is it from England? Yes, Nissans are made in England. Japan drives on the other side? It was just amazing to me how little people know about countries outside of this one. So you are going to get a lot of that. I did get some car stalkers. You know, they'd follow me to a restaurant if I was on the way to a restaurant. I was okay with that. I had one or two try and follow me home. That was not cool. Those guys, like, usually when I have a lot of fun cars, not at the same time, but if people want to see my car, usually I'm more than happy to pop the hood, let them take a look at it, you know, because these are people's dream cars. You know, if I can make their day a little bit better about looking at it, cool. But when you follow me home, that just kind of goes a little beyond what's really kind of comfortable. And those people I really did not open up to because I didn't want to encourage that type of behavior. Some people did ask about the R34. And I'm sure if you're watching this, there's still a part of you that's like, R32, I'd much rather have an R34. As of right now, this date, which is in 2020, the R34 is not legal. Give me 1 second. I am going to say that again. The R34 is not legal. If you bring it in and they catch you, they will crush your car. That is $100,000 to $120,000 you are gambling. Am I saying they will catch you? No. Am I saying that they can catch you? Yes. And I'm sure some of you are going to come back with, well, I know so-and-so and he's got state tags. If they've got state tags, they did it one of a couple ways. If they did what a lot of people do, which is they go out there and they grab the VIN tags off of, say, a 240SX, that is fraud. If they catch you, they will crush your car. Will they catch you? Don't know, but they could. If you get pulled over and you have a cop that's astute enough to know the difference of what a 240SX is and a Skyline, and he sees you have a VIN number that says a 240SX on it, they will take your car. Some people were able to bring the car under kit car VINs. I think that was Kaizen that used to do that. That loophole worked for a little bit but got shut down. What they would do is they would send the car over here without the engine and then drop the engine in here. So that works as long as you put an engine in a car that's not native to the car. So if you're bringing over a Skyline, an R34, and you drop a rotary engine into it, okay, you can have a kit car VIN. But if you bring over an R34 GTR and you drop in a RB26 DETT, it's no longer a kit car. They will catch you, they will crush your car. There are some people, and these are the lucky ones, some you could maybe go through the work of doing this. They have dealer plates, and that's where they've set themselves up as a car dealership, and they're running the car under dealer plates to be able to drive it on the road. If you are going to break the law on this, that seems like that's the safest way to do it, but realize you will never be able to resell the car. I know a lot of people say like, oh, why would I ever resell an R34? I thought the same thing about an R32, until I kind of got tired of the car. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So basically, my point is, you're only 4 years off of the R34 being legal. It's going to run you 100 to 120K. Yes, the prices may go up once it becomes legal, but ask yourself this: if you have the cash, or if you're going to try and float a loan for that type of car, is that a gamble you want to make? I personally wouldn't advise it. So now I'm going to talk about what it was like to actually drive the car. So the car it had its advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is it's actually a pretty small car, which made it very kind of nimble when it came to getting around the track, or doing canyon roads. You had a lot more road space to play with. The seats in the car, I've never been more impressed with stock seats in my life. They have really high bolstering on both the thighs and the back. You do not move in those chairs. That was one of the few cars I've owned where I was not tempted to swap out those chairs for like Sparcos or Recaros or some sort of aftermarket seat. Impressive seats on that, very well designed. Actually pretty comfortable too. I did a road trip in it that went from Salem, Oregon to Los Angeles, California. So did that 14-hour drive, didn't have an issue. Very good seats. Interior, I know I hate using this term because people are starting to use it with my Supra. The interior is kind of dated. It is a 90s car that looks like an early 80s car. It's really, like, the dash is just very, very 80s. The gauges are very, very 80s. If you're cool with that, go with it. The outside of the car also, to me, seemed very, very 80s. It's just kind of blocky, and it just kind of looks like your standard everyday sedan. If you don't know what a Skyline is, and you've never really seen an R32, you're going to drive right by it, not even pay any attention to it. So getting used to driving a right-hand drive car actually did not take that long. The pedals are actually the same. So the gas pedal's still on the right, brake is in the middle, clutch is on the left. So you don't have to worry about getting used to that. The shift pattern is actually the same as a left-hand drive car. It's just you're on the other side of the car. So now when I shift, if I was going into first is close to me and up. If I'm driving a right-hand drive car, first is to farther away from me and then up. So basically imagine someone took the steering wheel and the pedals and just literally pulled it out of the left-hand side of the car, put it on the right-hand side, and you're fine. It pretty much all works the same. The thing that actually took, if you can believe this, the longest to get used to was actually the rear view mirror. So when we look in our rear view mirror, we're used to looking up and to the right to see what's behind us. The mirror's on the other side. So when you drive the GT-R, you gotta look up and to the left. So that actually, for some odd reason, took the longest time for me to get used to. Also, sometimes when I put the car in reverse, I would instinctually try and look over this shoulder. And of course, I'm just looking at a B-pillar instead of looking over the other shoulder when I'm backing up into a parking spot or backing up out of a parking spot. The other funny thing that kind of happens when you're driving the GT-R is there'll be times where I will reach to use the windshield wipers and my hand will hit the door, because those are actually reversed also. So, the blinker is closer to the door. Oop, got another thumbs up from someone enjoying the Supra. And actually, the windshield wipers are actually up on the dash, so you don't have to worry about that. It's just the blinker. Occasionally, you miss it. Driving in the lane, that actually isn't as bad as some people make out. So what you have to do is what I did. Is a lot of people, when they first drive, because they're used to being on this side of the car and they're sitting on that side of the car, it kind of starts to veer into the other lane a little bit. So what I would do is, in my head, I'd say I'm sitting in the passenger seat, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and that would put me in the proper area of the lane, so I wasn't going over any lines. After about 2-3 weeks, though, you get used to where you're sitting in the car, and it just becomes instinctual. You don't have much drift over after that. Maybe like you're really, really tired. I guess it kind of happened a few times. I was start to veer to the left a little bit, and you'd be like, oh, so kind of wake yourself up and pull it back into the lane. So if you're concerned about getting used to driving a right-hand drive in the lane and just the mechanics of it, it's really not going to take you that long. You just have to be kind of a little bit more of an aware driver for, you know, a few weeks, and then it'll become second nature to you. Working on the car. Working on the car in some respects was easy, and in other respects was really not. So doing things like the suspension was actually very, very easy. The fuel pump just took a few minutes. But that engine bay is seriously tight. They really left no room in there. Like, to get the intake plenum out, you almost had to you had to bend some lines or almost just remove the ABS system altogether. It was not fun to get out of there. The cool thing about the engine, though, is it came with ITBs. I've never seen this on any other production car before. For those of you who don't know what ITBs is, ITB is individual throttle bodies. So most cars have like a butterfly valve on the front of their plenum. The Skyline actually has those butterflies on each individual throttle or intake runner into the block. And it kind of gives you a more snappy throttle response. On top of that, it comes with the twin turbos. And the cool thing is, so my Supra, it doesn't have them now, but the stock twins, they're sequential, which means you have one small turbo that spins pretty much whenever you're rolling forward, and then at a certain RPM, a gate pops open, and the second turbo spools, so you get all the power you're looking for. The RB26, very smart. They have it so like the front three exhaust runners power one turbo, the back three exhaust runners power the second turbo, so you're always in a true twin configuration. And to me, that was a much superior way of doing a twin turbo system if you have the choice. I know some people with the Supras do a true twin conversion. I just went single. It was easier. With the Skyline, though, cool thing is, some people are getting mad power out of twins. Not everybody goes to a big single. It's just personal preference. That'll be up to you depending on what it is you want out of your car. So getting parts for the Skyline. So this aspect of owning the car may have changed. I haven't had a Skyline now in about 3 years. But when I had it, getting parts was a bit of a pain in the ass. At least kind of like the stock maintenance parts. Import, for some reason, the performance parts were actually really easy to get. But because the car didn't come here officially, nobody really has the replacement parts. I had to go through one of two companies. There was Nissans out of Japan. They were a great company. And then there's Right Hand Parts, and they're out of Canada. So the problem is, first of all, you're ordering out of country, which means it's got to go through customs. If you order a part, I found being in Los Angeles, it took a week, maybe 2 weeks to get my part. So not entirely bad, but there's times where you want your parts, and sometimes it seems like they get delayed. I never got held up in customs, so I got lucky. But I knew there was always going to be a delay. The other issue with the fact that parts never came over to America is the cost. So just after I got my car registered, I was really going one way on the freeway. A big truck was coming the other way. Somehow it threw a rock, cracked my windshield. Very heartbreaking when you've only had the car for a couple weeks. But I figured, hey, it's a windshield, usually not big of a deal. That size windshield or that cut never came to the States, which means nobody has it. To get the part from either Nissans or Right Hand Drive after shipping was $1,000. It seemed like almost anything you wanted to do to this car for stock parts was going to run $1,000 just because of shipping or just the rarity of the parts. That may have changed now that there's more of the cars here. There may be people actually going to Japan to get the parts and bring over to sell, so that may have changed. For some reason though, like I said, the performance parts, like getting the fuel pump, the ECU, all that other stuff was actually very, very easy. The other question I get, especially now, is why did I sell it? Why did I not think it was the most awesome car on the planet and keep it forever? 26 has its Achilles heel. And for those of you watching who have dealt with RB26, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The oil pump. For those of you who don't know, this is always a concern if you're on the stock oil pump. So the oil pump from the factory came with a bit of a clearance issue. So if you're running high RPMs and maybe you're bouncing off the rev limiter, there's a gap between the cogs, and they'll kind of vibrate against each other, and one will break. And granted, that's not that bad. You can replace an oil pump, but the oil pump on the RB26 is partially within the oil pan, so when it breaks, the oil leaks back into the pan. You don't know that it's broken. You don't know that you're getting oil starvation in your engine, and you can end up seizing your engine, which is always a scary thought, because you know those engines still run about, I think they were 3,500 back when I had mine. They're probably still about the same as a guess. So the thing with that is, you can either A, do what I did, which was I got a external oil pressure and temp gauge, so I could just keep a monitor on that. If I saw the oil pressure drop, I knew I was an issue, pull over the car. I fortunately never had that issue. You can get replacement oil pumps, which you're looking at either the N1, which I hear kind of has the same problem, or Tomei, whatever the name is. They actually have an oil replacement pump that doesn't have the clearance issues. It'll give you the strength you need, and apparently will not break. So that's what you're going to do. The other issue you're going to have with that engine is if it's a I believe it's 91 or 92, the collar that drives the oil pump for some reason was short, and over time it'll round out. So most people either A, replace the whole crank, or you can get a sleeve, and that's just going to be personal choice on that. The other thing I found that was a bit annoying was all of the gaskets are paper. And when I first got the car, you got to realize it's a 25-year-old car now or more, so it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have issues. I was leaking. I had vacuum leak through the ITBs where the gasket is. So that's why I had to pull off that entire intake plenum. It's huge. The ITBs, pain in the ass, and replace it with metal gaskets. So be prepared. If you're buying one that hasn't had that done, the paper gaskets are probably starting to get to that age where they're going to start kind of cracking and rotting. You're going to have to do that. It was not a fun job. There's not a lot of places to get your hand underneath there, and there's actually some hoses that sit underneath the plenum where you need tiny hands. They're not big, but they're not tiny, so just kind of be aware of that. So getting back to why I got rid of the car. As you heard me talk about, engine, not that fun to work on, hard to get parts. The 2JZ, in my opinion, is a much better engine. It can actually handle 800 horsepower stock internals. The RB26 cannot get that high. The driving on the right-hand side after the novelty wore off was just not worth it to me. The other issue I had with the car is, like I said, after a while, it just kind of seemed a little bit dated. So to me, it was just a good call for me to just get rid of the car. I really didn't love the car anymore. I didn't think it was a bad car. I don't hate the car. If you want the car, I definitely say at least go out and test drive one. Get the experience of test driving one, and that way you'll know how you feel about the car. But I got into a situation where I could afford a Supra again. This is actually my second one. My first one I built and actually got shipped out to Sweden, and I always say I should have never sold that car. And so when the situation came up, it's like, hey, you know, I came across a bit of an influx of cash. If I sell the Skyline, I can jump back into the Supra, which in my opinion was the most perfect car. You know, bulletproof engine, crazy strong transmission, the dash wraps around. I like the rounded body style. So when it comes right down to it, personal preference. So that's why I ended up selling the Skyline. I didn't have too many mechanical issues with it. issue really was just, you know, trying to get the parts, like I said, that may have changed. And so, yeah, I offloaded the Skyline, jumped into the Supra, you see. So I hope that answers some questions that you may have had about owning and running around in an R32 GTR. Hopefully I gave you a decent warning about the R34. If you have any questions that I didn't answer about the R32, go ahead and post a comment down below and I will answer that. I have this great drive between school that takes about an hour and 15 minutes, so I'm more than happy to make more videos. And any other questions you might have about any of my other cars, like my first Supra, this Supra, I had an FD3 RX-7, I've had an S2000, I had a 2010 Camaro, I've had a 69 Camaro, number of Miatas. Love the Miatas. If you're looking for a first-time race car, definitely my big suggestion is get a Miata. So, if you'd like me to make more videos, go ahead and post down below,